A portfolio is made up of assets. The return of the portfolio is the return of those assets, but the risk of a portfolio comes from factors, from risk factors. Now, you can look at the risk of a portfolio directly through the assets. There's nothing wrong with that, but the result is something that's a little more like a two-dimensional view, something that's a little bit blurry also. To see why this is the case, here's an egg. This egg is your portfolio. Now, I'm not going to take the egg and break it on a frying pan, but if I did, it would illustrate an important point. The egg is made up of organic compounds, and those compounds are not very stable. When the environment changes, for example, when they get heated, they change in their nature. The compounds of the egg are like the assets of the portfolio. Here is one organic compound that's in an egg. It's vitamin B2, it's riboflavin. You can see that for all of its complexity, there are only 4 elements that make up this compound: nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. In fact, of the millions of organic compounds that are out there, those 4 elements make up over 95% of the weight. It's those 4 elements plus a trace element here and there added in. That is the same thing as what risk factors are to the assets in your portfolio. The bulk of the risk for all of the many assets in your portfolio come from a small set of risk factors. And so we can understand the risk much better if we decompose and look at those risk factors as the elements, so to speak, of risk. Now, doing that is valuable in a number of different ways. For one thing, it's easy to compare 2 different assets. Like, for example, if you have 2 ETFs, each one with different stocks in it, you still may discover that they're very similar in nature because they share similar weightings of the various risk factors. If we have 3 different assets, we may discover that there's a particular risk factor that weaves its way through all of them. So we get a sense of the risks as they expand through the portfolio. It's also much more intuitive. It's much simpler to use risk factors. But getting back to the example of the egg and how the organic compounds don't have stability, the risk factors, although not as stable as nitrogen or hydrogen or carbon or oxygen, the risk factors are stable compared to the assets that are built from them. And so when we look at risk on a risk factor basis, we're getting an approach that's easier to make comparisons, that's easier to see how risks thread, that's simpler to understand from a structural standpoint, and that's more stable as we look at things like the correlation or the effect of risk in the face of shocks.